Something is shifting inside the most watched family on Earth, and the palace does not want you to know. A quiet move has been made, not announced, not confirmed, and certainly not explained. But behind the gilded doors of the British monarchy, a power dynamic that has been building for years has now reached a breaking point. What Prince William and Catherine just set in motion has sent shockwaves through the institution, and the consequences for Camilla may be more devastating than anyone could have predicted. For a very long time, the British monarchy operated according to a deeply familiar script. King Charles, after waiting decades for the crown that was always his destiny, ascended the throne following the death of Queen Elizabeth II in September 2022. Beside him stood Camilla, a woman who had spent the better part of 3 decades navigating public hostility, quiet controversy, and the relentless weight of comparison to Diana, Princess of Wales. Their position at the pinnacle of the royal hierarchy seemed settled, even unshakable. Camilla had her title, Charles had his crown, and the institution that had weathered abdications, scandals, and constitutional crises appeared ready to enter a period of careful, measured stability. And yet, beneath the surface of an institution that prizes order above almost everything else, something has been quietly, unmistakably changing. The shift did not arrive through any single announcement or dramatic confrontation. It has been accumulating through months of public appearances, carefully managed messaging, and a series of strategic decisions that, when taken individually, might appear unremarkable. But when viewed as a pattern, when placed side by side and examined against the broader landscape of what has been happening inside the palace, those decisions form a picture that royal observers have found increasingly impossible to ignore. Prince William and Catherine, the Princess of Wales, are no longer simply waiting in the wings. They are, in the eyes of a growing number of people both inside and outside the institution, already operating as something far more significant than heirs in waiting. The evidence for that conclusion is not difficult to find. Public approval ratings for William and Catherine have remained consistently and impressively strong throughout the past several years, even as other members of the royal family became mired in controversy, scandal, and the deep fractures caused by the Duke and Duchess of Sussex's departure from senior royal life. While those crises created turbulence that threatened the reputation of the institution itself, William and Catherine maintained a steady and disciplined public presence. They became the face of stability, of continuity, and, critically, of a monarchy willing to engage with the real concerns of a generation that has grown increasingly sceptical of inherited power and ceremonial tradition. In a world that demands relevance, they delivered it consistently and without apology. King Charles's reign began under extraordinary circumstances that would test any leader. Ascending the throne after the death of the most recognisable monarch in modern history, Charles inherited an institution under immense pressure to prove its continued relevance to a rapidly changing world. His coronation at Westminster Abbey was a moment of genuine national and global significance. But almost from the beginning, Charles has faced health challenges of a serious and sustained nature. In early 2024, Buckingham Palace confirmed that the king was undergoing cancer treatment, a disclosure that shocked the world and immediately raised urgent questions about the practical realities of royal governance. A monarch managing a serious illness, while simultaneously fulfilling the demands of one of the most scrutinised roles on earth, is a monarch who must depend, whether he intends to or not, on the people around him. And the person most reliably positioned to carry that weight has been William. What has quietly emerged over the past year is something that royal historians have rarely been able to document with such clarity. A Prince of Wales who is not simply waiting for power but is, in many practical senses, already exercising it. William has appeared at state functions, diplomatic engagements, military ceremonies, and major national events in ways that consistently go beyond the ceremonial. He has spoken with a directness and authority that has drawn quiet comparisons, even among palace insiders, to a man who already understands himself to be in charge. His Homewards initiative, his decade-long commitment to environmental advocacy, and his highly visible engagement with the issues of mental health and homelessness are not the activities of an heir marking time. They are the activities of a man who has long since decided what kind of king he intends to be, and who is no longer prepared to simply wait before acting like one. And then there is Catherine. For months, the world watched in mounting anxiety as she retreated almost entirely from public life to undergo treatment for a health condition that she disclosed only after months of speculation, rumour, and a level of global media attention that was, by any measure, extraordinary. When she finally returned to public duties, her first appearances were measured, carefully chosen, and deliberately paced, the re-entry of a woman who had decided exactly how she wished to be seen. But what has happened since is far more remarkable than a simple return. Catherine has not merely resumed her role, She has, according to those who watch the palace most closely, fundamentally redefined it. Her choice of engagements, the causes she has chosen to champion, the quiet and unmistakable authority with which she has positioned herself beside William at some of the most consequential moments of the past year. All of it speaks to a woman who has emerged from her most difficult personal chapter with a sharpened clarity of purpose that was simply not visible before. And it is that clarity, that deliberate, unambiguous sense of direction, that has reportedly sent a very specific message to those at the heart of the institution. A message that Camilla, for all her years of experience navigating the complex and often brutal world of royal politics, may not have been fully prepared to receive. Because what sources close to the palace have quietly begun to suggest is not simply that William and Catherine are more popular, it is that they are more powerful. And the question that now hangs over every private conversation about the future of the crown is one that no one inside the palace appears willing to answer directly. If the balance of power has already shifted this far, what exactly is left for Camilla to hold on to? To understand why Catherine's recent moves have generated the level of conversation they have inside royal circles, it is necessary to understand the particular and deeply uncomfortable position that Camilla has always occupied within the institution. She did not arrive at her role as queen through the uncomplicated path of a beloved outsider chosen to complement the crown. She arrived through years of controversy, through the long shadow of a marriage that the British public never fully forgave, and through a rehabilitation process so carefully managed, so strategically executed over so many years, that it stands as one of the most remarkable reinventions in modern royal history. By the time Charles was crowned at Westminster Abbey, Camilla had achieved something that many people once believed was genuinely impossible. She had made herself acceptable. Not universally loved, not beyond criticism, but accepted. And that acceptance was, for Camilla, everything. It was the foundation upon which her role as queen was built, and it was something she had fought, quietly and tenaciously, for the better part of 3 decades. Which is precisely why what is now happening inside the palace matters so much to her, and why Catherine's rise may threaten it in ways that go far deeper than simple rivalry. The relationship between Camilla and Catherine has never been openly hostile. On the surface, it has always been managed with the kind of careful, practiced civility that the royal family excels at projecting. Public appearances have shown warmth, or at least the convincing appearance of it. There have been no confirmed reports of dramatic confrontations, no palace sources going on record to describe screaming arguments or formal complaints. The British royal family does not operate that way. Its conflicts are slower, quieter, and infinitely more carefully concealed. They play out not in shouted accusations, but in small, deliberate choices. Who is placed at the centre of a photograph, whose agenda dominates a joint engagement, whose public profile receives the most visible investment of royal resources. And by those measures, the shift that has taken place over the past year has been, to those watching closely, both unmistakable and deeply significant. Catherine's so-called power move is not a single dramatic gesture. It is a series of calculated, precisely timed decisions that, taken together, paint a portrait of a woman who has decided that the time for deference has passed. Her return to public life was not simply a health recovery story, though it was covered extensively as one. It was, according to people familiar with the inner workings of the palace, the beginning of a new phase in her public identity, one in which she is no longer positioning herself purely as a supportive partner to William, or as a popular but ultimately secondary figure in the royal hierarchy. She is quietly but unmistakably claiming space, and the space she is claiming is not empty. It is space that Camilla, and by extension, Charles, has come to regard as their own. Consider the specific pattern of engagements that Catherine has chosen since her return. She has moved with clear intention toward causes and platforms that carry genuine institutional weight, areas where royal involvement signals not ceremonial interest, but real influence. Her work on early childhood development and mental health policy has placed her in conversation with government ministers, researchers, and international organisations in a way that transcends the traditional understanding of what a princess does. She is not attending galas. She is not cutting ribbons at hospital openings. She is building a record of sustained, evidence-based advocacy that gives her a policy profile that very few members of the royal family, past or present, have ever managed to develop. And that profile, crucially, makes her indispensable, not just to the public narrative of the monarchy, but to its actual credibility as an institution capable of meaningful engagement with the challenges of the modern world. That indispensability is what makes the tension with Camilla so complicated, because Camilla's role, by its very nature, is heavily dependent on Charles. She is queen because he is king. Her influence flows from his position, from her proximity to the man who wears the crown. That is not a criticism. It is simply the structural reality of how the institution works. But what William and Catherine represent is something different, a model of royal power that is not purely dependent on inheritance or appointment. It is earned, built, and maintained through public trust. And public trust, as every serious analyst of the modern monarchy knows, is the only currency that actually matters in a world where the alternative to the monarchy, a republic, an elected head of state, a dismantled institution, is no longer entirely beyond the imagination of a significant portion of the British public. Royal commentators who have been tracking these dynamics with particular care have noted something specific about the way William has been conducting himself in recent months. He has, they say, stopped performing the role of the patient, dutiful heir. In private meetings, in diplomatic conversations, in his engagements with major institutions and national figures, William has begun carrying himself with the quiet authority of a man who is not preparing to lead, but who already considers himself, in all the ways that matter, in charge. That transition, subtle as it is, has not gone unnoticed inside the palace, and the question of how Charles responds to it, a king managing serious illness, managing the demands of his position, and now managing the unmistakable rise of his son, is one that people close to the institution are watching with an intensity that they are careful not to show in public. Meanwhile, Camilla is watching something else entirely. She is watching Catherine, a woman she has known for more than 15 years, a woman she has shared royal platforms with, exchanged pleasantries with, appeared alongside at some of the most significant moments of the Crown's recent history, become, in the eyes of the public and increasingly in the eyes of the institution itself, something more than the wife of the future king. And that transformation, quiet and undeniable, carries with it a question that Camilla must confront, whether she chooses to or not. Because if Catherine has now established herself as a force within the monarchy that operates independently of whoever holds the crown, if she has built enough public trust, enough institutional credibility, enough visible authority to shape the direction of the crown regardless of who currently sits upon it, then what does that mean for a queen whose power has always been entirely dependent on the man beside her? And if Charles's health continues to define the limits of his reign, if the institution quietly, incrementally, continues its shift toward William and Catherine, then the question is no longer whether Camilla will have to adapt. The question is whether there will be anything left for her to adapt to. There is a particular kind of silence that settles over powerful institutions when the ground beneath them begins to shift. It is not the silence of peace or resolution. It is the silence of people who understand exactly what is happening, but have calculated, with great precision, that saying so out loud would cost them more than staying quiet. That is the silence that has reportedly descended over certain corridors of the British royal establishment in recent months. The conversations are happening, in private rooms, over carefully arranged lunches, in the guarded language of people who have spent their careers learning how to say consequential things without ever appearing to say anything at all. And at the centre of those conversations, the question being asked with increasing urgency is the same one that a growing portion of the British public has already begun to ask from the outside. Is the British monarchy, quietly and without any formal declaration, already in the process of handing itself to the next generation? The historical precedent for what is unfolding is not difficult to find, though the palace would be deeply uncomfortable with the comparison. There have been moments before in royal history when the heir to the throne accumulated so much public authority, so much visible influence, so much genuine gravitational pull, that the sitting monarch found their own position subtly, uncomfortably diminished, not through any act of rebellion or disloyalty, but simply through the unstoppable arithmetic of time and relevance. The institution has always understood that its survival depends on its ability to regenerate, to produce, in each generation, figures capable of commanding the public's emotional investment. When those figures arrive too compellingly, too completely, they can cast a shadow that even a reigning monarch struggles to step out of. And the shadow that William and Catherine are currently casting is, by any serious measure, an extraordinarily long one. The specific developments that have contributed to that shadow are worth examining in detail, because they reveal a strategy, whether consciously designed or organically evolved, that is remarkable in both its scope and its effectiveness. Over the past 12 months, William has inserted himself into the centre of national conversations that go far beyond the traditional boundaries of royal involvement. His engagement with the homelessness crisis through the Homewards programme has produced concrete, visible outcomes in multiple British cities, the kind of outcomes that generate not just warm headlines, but genuine institutional credibility. His environmental work has placed him on platforms alongside world leaders and international policymakers. His willingness to speak with directness about subjects that previous generations of royals would have approached with extreme caution has created a public image of a future king who does not merely represent the nation's traditions, but who is prepared to engage with its most urgent present realities. These are not the actions of a man waiting passively for power. They are the actions of a man who has decided, with complete clarity, what he intends to do with it. Catherine's contribution to that strategy is, if anything, even more significant, because it is more surprising, and because it has happened against a backdrop of personal difficulty that would have justified a far more cautious and self-protective approach. Her cancer diagnosis and the months of treatment and recovery that followed were, by every account, an experience of profound seriousness. The public speculation that surrounded her absence, the theories, the rumours, the genuinely troubling degree of invasive media coverage, added a layer of pressure to an already devastating personal situation that very few people in any walk of life could have managed with the composure she ultimately displayed. And yet what emerged from that period was not a diminished Catherine, not a more cautious or more withdrawn presence, but something that those who know her have described as a woman who has, through the experience of confronting something genuinely terrifying, arrived at a complete certainty about who she is and what she is there to do. That certainty is visible in everything she does now. It is visible in the way she stands, the way she speaks, the causes she chooses, the moments she decides to make her own. And it is a quality that, in the brutal economy of public life, is almost impossible to manufacture and equally impossible to ignore. Camilla understands this better than almost anyone. She is not a naive figure, and she is not someone who underestimates the dynamics playing out around her. She has survived too much, navigated too many genuine crises of perception and reputation, to be caught entirely off guard by the emergence of a more powerful Catherine. But understanding a threat and having an effective response to it are two very different things, and the particular challenge that Catherine's rise presents to Camilla is one for which there may be no clean solution. Because the things that make Catherine powerful, her public approval, her personal story, her authentic connection to causes that genuinely matter, her partnership with the man who will one day be king, are not things that can be countered through palace strategy or media management. They are structural. They are, in the deepest sense, irreversible. And Camilla, whose own position has always been structurally fragile, in ways that her public rehabilitation only partially concealed, must now contend with the reality that the institution she worked so hard to become part of may be quietly, irresistibly, moving beyond the chapter in which she plays a central role. The question of what happens to Camilla in a monarchy, increasingly defined by William and Catherine, is one that few people are willing to answer directly. Publicly, the position of Buckingham Palace is that the royal family is a united institution, that the relationships between its members are warm and collaborative, and that the idea of a power struggle within the crown is a media confection rather than a constitutional reality. That position will be maintained regardless of what happens behind closed doors, because the alternative, an admission that the monarchy is experiencing genuine internal tension at its highest level, is one the palace cannot afford. But the gap between what the palace says publicly and what informed observers believe to be true has rarely seemed wider than it does at this particular moment. And in that gap, the real story of what is happening to the British crown is quietly, relentlessly unfolding. What is certain, regardless of how any individual relationship inside the palace is currently calibrated, is that the monarchy William and Catherine will one day formally lead is already being shaped by decisions being made right now. Every engagement they take on, every cause they champion, every moment of genuine public connection they create is a brick in the foundation of a reign that, if Charles's health continues to impose limits on the scope of his public role, may effectively have already begun. The institution will never say that out loud. It will never use that language, never acknowledge that the transition is already underway in any meaningful practical sense. But the evidence is accumulating in plain sight, and the people who understand what they are looking at have stopped pretending otherwise. Because the real question was never whether William would eventually be king. That was always certain. The real question, the one that nobody inside the palace is prepared to answer, the one that Camilla lies awake confronting, the one that will define the next decade of one of the most scrutinised institutions on earth, is this: by the time the crown formally passes, will there be anything left to pass? Or will William and Catherine have already built something so complete, so powerful, and so irreversibly their own, that the coronation, when it finally comes, will be nothing more than the world catching up to a reality that was decided long, long before anyone was ready to admit it?